Thank you for the invitation. I'm always happy with these opportunities and talk about paleontology and especially megafauna. That is my main passion, not just like my main experience and research, but I think it's fascinating all the research questions that we have about megafauna. So I hope I can bring a little bit about this passion and this enthusiasm for megafauna. And I just want to say that English is not my native language. So if there's something that you don't understand and you think, oh, maybe I missed, maybe actually I did it wrong or I didn't do it properly. So please write on the chat or wait for us to talk a little bit about this a little bit about after this talk, so we can ask any questions that maybe I missed something or you didn't understand anything in this talk. So yeah, thank you again for this invitation, and I'm gonna share my screen. Also, I don't know, I hope you cannot hear this motorcycle noise because I'm at home right now and I'm close to the window. So I'm sorry, just please say something on the
We're in
microphone.
Baltimore, and I think noise doesn't phase any of us, but I don't hear anything on your end.
That's great. So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen and I'm not gonna be able to see you guys. So if there's anything wrong, like the internet connection or anything, I hope it's not, but you let me know if I froze or something and I can come back to the slides. Okay, so everyone is seeing my
Looks
screen?
good. I think we're all seeing it.
Great. I'm gonna take a little time to see if this is not, okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we work on when we're talking about and thinking about the paleoecology of the Pleistocene megafauna, particularly in the Americas. So first, I think I'm gonna be here, okay. First, I think it's important for us to talk about the definitions of megafauna. And when we think about megafauna, I wish I could be able to, I was able to see you guys and we could talk about that, what you define megafauna, what do you think it is, the definition of megafauna. So it would be more interesting to talk together about that. But I imagine that, I suppose that you guys would think about mega animals, like huge animals, like big animals. And when we think about that, and with the configuration, like the current configuration of today's landscapes, we think about Africa. So we think about the big animals, especially mammals of Africa. So in paleontology, some researchers are gonna have different definitions about what is megafauna, how we're gonna classify these animals as medium, large, or small size. But one of the classic definitions is the one that says that megafauna, it's all the animals that are more than 45 kilograms. I have no idea that in pounds, so I'm sorry. So more than 45 kilograms, mainly mammals, and then especially mega, like huge herbivores that were more than 1,000 kilograms, and mega carnivores, like huge carnivores that were more than 500 kilograms. So when you think about megafauna and big animals, you're not going to think only about these mega herbivores or the carnivores. You're going to talk about some birds, some reptiles, some mammals that are not land mammals, so like sea mammals. So if you think that megafauna is just like huge animals, you have like a broader aspect of what is megafauna, but we're going to talk here about especially land mammals, especially these big, like large animals that are mainly mammals, and they were extinct, the ones that were extinct during the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene that happened around 10,000 years ago. So this is what we're going to have in mind when we think about what is megafauna and what kind of animals we're talking here. So when I talk about this extinction, when we talk about megafauna, when researchers work with megafauna, they are talking about this group of animals that were extinct during this transition, this period of the during the Pleistocene and the Holocene. And here is like the geological table, time table. And here with the color, we have the Cenozoic, right? So we have like the extinction of the dinosaurs here between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic. And during the Cenozoic, we have the evolution of several mammals from the small mammals, smaller, of course, than megafauna during the Mesozoic, to the huge animals that we have in the Cenozoic. So during like 60, 65 million years, we have the evolution of several huge animals around the world, in Eurasia, in the Americas, Australia, so in all the continents. And during the whole Cenozoic, we have several different climate changes, right? We have ice ages, we have warmer and colder climate oscillations. So all of that happened during the Cenozoic, especially during the Pleistocene, that is this time period between 2.5 million years ago until around 11,000 years ago. And this megafauna evolved and survived. Different species survived in different times during this million of years, but the Pleistocene, particularly the ones that lived during the Pleistocene, they survived all this ice ages period, right? They survived all this climate change that happened during the climate changes that happened between these 2 million years ago until 10,000 years ago. But during the transition, around the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene, most of these megafauna were extinct around the world in all the continents. And it was a very selective extinction. So as we can see in this first image of the percentage of the extinction intensity linked to the size of the animals, we see that small mammals, animals, but particularly mammals, were not severely affected. And as you grow the body mass, as you have like larger animals, you have a higher intensity of these extinctions. And this happened similarly in all the continents, from tundras to tropical areas. So all the continents have this specific selective selection of large animals, especially land mammals. So when we're thinking about the evolution and everything that I was talking about, how when the dinosaurs died, we have space, we have the ecological niche to open for the evolution of the mammal evolution. You have a different configuration, a different paleobiological configuration and ecological configurations, because you don't have more the huge dinosaurs that predominate the landscape, and you are able, like the small animals are able to evolve. So you go from these very small animals that didn't have a lot of space during the Mesozoic to huge animals, large and huge animals along the Cenozoic. And you need to think about also how the continents were, how the tectonics made the continents during this million years ago, 60 million years ago. So you have evolution of different groups in different continents, And most of these continents were isolated. So Australia, for example, was totally isolated from other continents. So they have like a very specific extinct megafauna. And South America also was isolated from North America. We didn't have the Central America connecting these continents around 50 until 3 million years ago. So these two continents have like especially like particularly group of fauna also. So some examples of this Cenozoic megafauna in South America were like this very weird group of animals, including giant sloths, and particularly giant sloths with several different ecological landscapes. They were able to live in different ecological landscapes, including marine sloths, as we can see here, like a giant sloth that could swim. And we have like the terror birds, like these big birds that were carnivores. We have not ungulates, and we have our own carnivores that looks like a saber-toothed cat, but it's not. It's not related to the felids. Is marsupial, the Thylacosmilus. So all of these, some of these, of course, I wouldn't have time to show all the fauna here, but these are some example of very weird and typical South America megafauna from the Cenozoic, but that was also extinct a little before this recent extinction that we're going to talk about later. So just some examples of this weird and I think it's beautiful extinct fauna. So after all of these groups that evolved and were extinct by natural causes, by natural selection, all of the during the changes that happened during the Cenozoic, during the Pliocene, around 3 million years ago, we finally have the connection of the continents of South America and North America. So all of these especially specific South American fauna and North American fauna start to migrated from the continents. And this migration is called the Great American Biotic Interchange. And this is one of the main biogeographic and paleogeographic events, recent events of the Cenozoic, because it changed a lot, not just this migration and this interchange of faunas between the continents, but also, as we can see in this first image, before we have a specific setting for the water movements from the ocean movement of the different oceans, like the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And then when we have the Central America emerging from the Isthmus of Panama, you separate these oceans. So you have isolated populations in the ocean and also some islands. And you have different genetics, like reduction of genetic flow from the oceans. So we have like speciations, all of that genetic changes that happen when you isolated populations. And you have the migration of the fauna that made it able for some particularly fauna from North America, such as carnivores, bears and smilodons like saber-toothed cats and canids to come to South America, and especially the giant sloths and the giant armadillos went to North America. So here's some example when we're talking about the Pleistocene megafauna, about this kind of animals that were in the continent during around 2 million to around 10,000 years ago. And we have saber-toothed cats, we have American horses, we have the famous mammoths and mastodons, we have bears, we have paleollamas, and we have the ancient bison, some examples. And most of them, just the bison that is an exception, all of that migrated to South America. That's why today we have llamas in South America, for example. They is an example of this allochthon fauna, and especially like some species, South American species of bears too. And some examples of the South American Pleistocene megafauna that also were able to migrate. I just think that Macrakeonia, this one here on the top, on the bottom, I think this didn't reach North America, but all the other ones reached north. So capybaras and giant armadillos, different species of giant armadillos, so glyptodons and Homicina pampaterids, and giant sloths, several of giant sloths, different species of giant sloths, and not ungulates like the toxodon. And some species were so successful to migrate through the continents. They were so flexible. They were able to live in so many different environments, even through the Americas, that we call Pan-American species. So this is one species of giant sloth, the Eremotherium laurilardi, and you can find that this is the most common fossils found in Brazil, actually. And you found that species in all over Brazil, from the Amazon to the South Brazil, that is really close to Uruguay and Argentina. So it's a very today is a very cold environment. So all of Brazil, most of South America, north of South America, some places in Central America and south of the continental United States. So this is one of the most amazing species that was huge, as we can see here in this picture with me at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, with me in the scale. So this is the size of this giant sloth. It was one of the largest giant sloths, together with the Megatherium, that is more concentrated in south of South America, here in Argentina, Uruguay. But Eremotherium was very Pan-American, so they could reach all of South and until North America. That shows the ecological flexibility and the ecological flexibility of these species to live in different environments. And here are some examples of paleoartistic reconstructions of this megafauna. So based on where we find these fossils and what we know about them, about their size, so how they could live in that environment, what kind of environment was that? If you find some species that today we know that even like ground sloths that live walking and not climbing, they, depending on their size, the species could climb also. But some species, like this one that I was talking about, the Eremotherium, was so huge, they were so huge that they could not climb at all. So if you have like different species that you know the size and if they could climb or not, together with several approaches, paleoecological approaches, you can reconstruct the environment. So this is one of the most amazing things, I think, about megafauna, is how you can reconstruct the scenario of how it looked like. So, for example, this first picture is how it looked like Bahia state, a state here in Northeast Brazil, that today is very, the biome is called Caatinga. That is like open savanna kind of environment. So you have like, this is from my master's paper. And these are some of the fossils that we found there in this area, in this region. And then we do some analysis, for example, isotopic analysis, to understand what kind of plants these animals were eating, so what kind of vegetations were available. You have like several approaches, paleoecological approaches. The most common, at least that I am aware, that I work with and I see people working with megafauna, are the stable isotopes and microwear analysis of the tooth. So depending on the scratches that you have in specific parts of the tooth, you can analyze and characterize the diet of this animal. So if they have more grass kind of diet, or if they have softer leaves from forested areas that we call citrus plants. So the same thing is what happened with the isotopic analysis. You can, it's very, I'm not going to be in details here because it's a whole new talk just about these approaches, but just to give an example of how we can reconstruct the diet of these animals. So with this analysis, we can reconstruct what the animal were eating. And with that, we can have an idea of how the environment looked like. Was a forest, or was a open vegetation, was a mosaic of forested areas in an open savanna-like environment, and how these animals were competing for resources. So if you have, for example, here, the giant sloths eating more of these shrubs and this kind of tree and roots, together with the toxodon, they could be more a competitor rather than the giant sloths and the horses. That was most cases here in the Americas, at least, we see that horses are mainly feeding on C4 grasses. So if you have some environment change or some ecological pressures, you know that the giant sloth can just eat something else. They're not gonna be very in a very bad competition with horses, for example, because they have like these different niches. So this is one example of how we can reconstruct the paleo environment. And also when we work with carnivores, we can also, with the isotope analysis, characterize what kind of prey they were eating. So the saber-toothed cats were competing with some canids like Protossium for prey. Here it's also a paper, a paleoartistic reconstruction for a paper that my collaborators made here in Brazil, also in this region in Brazil that is called the Brazilian Intertropical region. And some bears, for example, in this paper, we were able to see that bears, they were omnivorous, so they could eat both fruits and plants, and also some animals, and the potential prey for these animals were the giant sloths. So it's very interesting to be able to reconstruct the environment. And when you have that coupled with radiocarbon dating, we can see the changes. So in the same area, how these animals were interacting with each other and what they were eating and what happened 10,000 years after that. So we can compare if there was any significant climate change or ecological pressures between these animals. This is another example of a paleo environment reconstruction, but for Argentina. So today we know that Argentina is in the Pampas regions, are these grasslands, open areas too. And you can see in the Pleistocene what kind of animals were living there and what they were eating, what kind of prey of different animals. And we can reconstruct the past of this region. Here is an example of the paleoenvironments of North America. So what is really interesting, I think, when I think about and compare with the South America and North America, is that when I work with Brazil, mainly of our megafauna fossils come from geological settings in the Pleistocene that are a mixture of I'm just going to try to, okay, here is a mixture of mixture of vegetations from like open environment, open savannas, together with some fragment forest. And in North America, it's really interesting to see how you have some plains, some tundras, and also some regions like that, like this in Brazil. So these two environments are very different. And this you can think about more of this North America with the mountains, with the Great Plains, probably snow. And then you have these two images of paleoenvironmental reconstruction of La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles in California, where we have, similar to what I was showing about Brazil, you have open landscapes with some forest and giant sloths and saber-toothed cats, pediollamas, kind of similar fauna also. So what is the importance of this megafauna when we're thinking about paleoecology, when we're thinking about ecology in the past, when we want to investigate not just the animal, not just the taxonomy, and okay, it's a new species, it's a new giant sloth, what this giant sloth tells us, what this mastodon tells us. So several studies on the Pleistocene megafauna, especially on paleoecology, they raise the ecological function of this animal and how that changed the environment today in different proportions. So for example, these Pleistocene mega mammals, they were very important for the long distance dispersal of seeds, right? Of bigger seeds of fruits with large seeds. And then when you have this megafauna extinct, you don't have this service anymore, this ecological service. They were very important for the nutrients of the soil. So a very interesting study here in Amazon, in Bolivian Amazon, if I'm not wrong, shows that there's a difference, significant difference in the potassium nutrients on the soil of the Amazon from the late Pleistocene to what we have today. And they link that to the change of the forest because how we lost these mega mammals. So they were important for with their large poops, with their large interaction with the soil and their seed dispersal, they were able to configure the geochemistry of the soil. And also, they were able to change the environment as engineers. So small mammals could be dependent of these large mammals because the small mammals are not able to clean the landscape. So here is an example of common current elephant in Africa that was just cleaning the landscape by taking all of these trees with their tusks so they can clean the path for small mammals. And that leads to co-extinction also. So when you don't have anymore these large mammals, these large herbivores mainly, that are able to change the landscape and clean the grass and take the coarse grasses. You affect the small mammals, so you don't have a very rich nutrient soil anymore. You don't have an open environment that is also important for smaller mammals. So if one is extinct, the other one can be extinct also. And so all of these are some examples of how important this megafauna was for the ecology, for the environment function, the ecological function and the structure. And we can see with the megafauna fossils, especially when we have analogs, when we have some fauna here in Africa mainly, and we see how they behave, you can expect you can expect to these similar functions to have been done by this megafauna in similar environments in the Americas in particular. So besides all of this importance of the megafauna and the ecological function in the environments, why they were extinct, like I was saying in the beginning of this talk, we know that several large mammals were extinct around the world in all the continents, just not so much in Africa, but in all the other continents, they were extinct around the same time, around 10,000 years ago, in the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene. So the main reasons for that, we still debate why these animals were extinct, why megafauna was extinct around the world. And then we have like researchers working with specific continents. And then we are building this case, we are building our studies in different continents. So sometimes we have a new study showing that evidence for Australia shows that it was humans the main role and the main reason for why the Australian megafauna was extinct. And then you have like another specific study in the Americas showing maybe the same or maybe no, it was climate change. And then you have like broader studies that try to get evidence, gather evidence from all the continents and build a model, but we still don't have a consensus. So we still don't have an answer for that, but we have two main reasons and the probably explanation that was humans, there were humans. So humans killed that animal both by overhunting them or not necessarily directly by overhunting them, but also changing the environment by being a new competitor with the carnivores for their prey, with the herbivores for the vegetation, for the fruits, and fragmenting the landscape and being able to make fire and putting fire into the areas that they were living in. So this is one possibility, one reason of why megafauna was extinct, like human behavior. And another possibility is that it was thought just only climate change and just the change of the environment, especially around 10,000 years ago, made these animals change not just the climate temperature, but also the configuration of the forest from an open landscape to a more forested area in mainly in several continents. But then it's kind of one of the weakness of that is that how that change in environment happened around the same time in several continents and different biomes, so from Arctic environments to tropical environments. So it's kind of hard to explain how climate change would be able to have like this very massive, to make this very massive extinction, especially in all over the world around the same time and affecting the same target, right? Large land mammals. So sometimes we have like recent papers saying here, for example, that megafauna extinctions are linked to human range and expansion and not climate change. And then we have other researchers writing papers saying, no, climate change and not human density, human population growth is correlated to the megafauna declines. Here is one example of, okay, at least in North America. So, and then we have like this specific interesting paper of one of the most, not sure if it's important, the right word, but one of the most famous and with the biggest collection of megafauna in the Americas, that is La Brea in California. And they did like this very interesting study that shows that conclude that the human expansion in California, and especially the human-made fire, made change the landscape and made these animals to be extinct in the region in La Brea. So humans making fire made this ecosystem vulnerable and these animals vulnerable for extinctions. And also another very interesting and hotly debated topic that is really related to that is when we're thinking about humans being one of the main reasons for the megafauna extinction, we need to understand, of course, when humans got to the Americas. So for a long time, we thought that humans got to the Americas from Asia around 13,000 years ago. That is related to the Clovis culture. And they expanded south until they reached South America in this time frame, like 12,000 years ago. And then that made sense because then you have like a very short window from when humans got to the Americas to, okay, they were interacting with these animals and they were overhunting them. And shortly after these animals die, we have the extinction of megafauna around 10,000 years ago. So it's probably linked to humans, right? But we have several evidence saying different histories and explaining the human history in a different way. First, we know now that humans were in the Americas before the Clovis culture. This is widely accepted in archaeology. So we know that humans were in North America and South America with a very famous archaeological site in Chile around at least 15,000 years ago. And then you have several other archaeological sites saying that humans were in the Americas at least 20,000 years ago and maybe 30,000 years ago. This is still very disputed and very debated, but we are debating. So we have researchers saying we have evidence humans were here. So they were interacting with these animals and living with megafauna way more than 2,000 or 5,000 years ago, maybe 10, 20,000 years ago, earlier than that we thought. So when we think about that, maybe we also change our understanding of our roles to the extinction. So maybe we didn't play so much role, or maybe we were interacting in a more sustainable way. And then with the climate change and the good conditions for even humans to live and expand, we have a higher density, and that was the key for overhunting and exploring the environment in a more significant way that affected these animals. Another interesting approach is when we think about how long these animals were living. So when we think about the chronology of megafauna, so for a long time, again, we were thinking that megafauna were extinct around 10,000 years ago. And this is what we say in general, right? We say that megafauna was extinct in the Americas during this transition around 10,000 years ago, and the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene. But then with some researchers show in new papers and new studies that some megafauna were able to live for longer than that. So here, for example, is a paper that shows that native horses were living in some sites in North America, in Yukon, in Canada, until around 5,000 years ago. And some researchers here in Brazil, we don't have the paper published yet, so I'm just showing the location of where this study was carried on. In Northeast Brazil, we have this very interesting geological setting that have like several of megafauna bonds, especially because animals used to live around this area, and in the rain season, they used to use this area to drink water, right? They were around this area, and then when they died, their bonds were exposed to the surface, and with the rain, with the over the time, these bonds, these skeletons were carried out to this pit hole, this tank that we call here, because in the dry seasons, this didn't have water anymore, so it was like empty. And then with the weather seasons again, these bonds were carried to that. So there's these cycles over the Quaternary where we have several of megafauna bonds. And some recent research studies shows that megafauna were living in Brazil, including giant sloths and pediollamas, until around 5,000 years ago also, and maybe 3,000 years ago. This was exposed and presented in a conference that I went here in Brazil last month. And they just told me and to the people in the conference that some results were accepted for publication. It's not published yet, the paper is not out, but it was accepted. So soon we're gonna have that, and I think that is going to be very interesting for people discussing the chronology of megafauna, and again, the human roles in their extinction. So all of that just shows us that we still have a lot more to ask and search and study. We don't have the answers yet. It's not a very linear topic of, okay, megafauna lived until then, and humans got here around this time, and this was extinct, and it's not that easy like that. We know that for sure now. So basically, just to finish this talk, I want to show you how it's important to understand megafauna and their importance in the environment, and how we are able to understand and reconstruct their environments, and how we can apply this knowledge today to our main questions today, our main challenges today in ecology and geosciences. So one of our main challenges is the global warming, right? So the climate change, global warming, human affecting the landscape with pollutions, with climate change is the main thing, right? So some researchers, especially ecologists, propose that we are already in a different geological time. We are in the Anthropocene, not in the Holocene anymore. And different researchers shows that we need to include the Anthropocene in different times. So, okay, when we think about, okay, researchers like ecologists, when does the Anthropocene starts? And most of them suggest that the Anthropocene should start here around 10,000 years ago, because of the megafauna extinctions and because they link that to human role. And because, as we saw in this talk, I hope that I was able to show you, is that how this extinction was severe around the world in different environments and targeting specifically land mammals. Some suggest that is when we have the spread of farming, the large-scale mining, when Europeans were to the Americas, colonized the Americas, the Industrial Revolution, that makes a lot of more sense for me. And then you have like different time range, but for them, for ecologists, we are definitely in the Anthropocene. One of the reasons also, not just the climate change and the human role in possible extinctions, is how we are having, we are seeing already some fossils, some rocks covered with plastics. So they have like this specific word. I hope I remember the name. If not, you can say in the chat. I think it's plastic something. I forgot that in English now. So like it's a specific rock, like sedimentary rock with plastic, full of plastic, that never happened in the Earth history before, right? And this is production of like a human production plastic. And this is being seen in sedimentary rocks. So should we be in the Anthropocene already? But some geologists reject that. And this is from a recent reunion of geoscientists from the officially stratigraphic commission, the ones that decide if we're changing or not and how we're changing the geological timetable. And in this last meeting this year, the geologists, they reject that. We don't have enough evidence for that to be inserted in the Earth, history. This is just a specific part of the Holocene. So this is a very interesting debate, and I hope that we are able to talk more about that in the next years in academia. And also megafauna is very important, besides if we are or not in the Anthropocene, to understand how they were working, how the landscape was working, how the ecology was during the Pleistocene, and the function of these mammals in the Pleistocene, so we can learn from that and apply today. So, for example, we know that megafauna are ecosystem engineers, right? We know the importance for nutrition of the soils, for interaction with other species, for changing the landscape and being like engineers of the landscape. So let's put more efforts on rewilding some regions today with large mammals. So we have like this tropic rewilding approach being very commonly utilized in ecological studies. So we have like the Pleistocene parks in North America, which are great. I love that. And in Europe, they are putting a lot of effort on that too. So it's really interesting to understand the past and understand the importance of this megafauna in the past, so we can apply to recent ecological challenges that we face today. So I would like to thank you. I hope that I was able to give you a brief overview of the importance of megafauna, of what kind of groups we have here in South America and North America, how they were migrating during the Pleistocene, and the possibilities of their extinction, why they were extinct. And I just want to close with this part of Charles Darwin in his book. That is when he came to South America, and he's in Argentina, and he founds all of these megafauna bonds, right? And he says, okay, we have tapir, guanaco, armadillos, capybara, like huge animals, right? Compared to untranscended race. And then he asked himself, what then has exterminated so many living creatures in South America, North America? And it's interesting that we still cannot answer that. Like it's a question that Charles Darwin was making, and it's something that we still try to answer. So I hope that we are able to answer that soon, or at least learn more about that, especially when we're talking about the Americas. We need to think about all the continents, right? All the countries. And it's not easy to make science in South America, for example. We do not have a lot of resources. We do have a lot of fossils. We do have amazing collections, but we don't have money for dating them and have especially a great chronology and do the isotopes so we can see what these animals were eating and if there was a change in their diet over time. And we have the Amazon. We cannot just cut the trees and look for bones there. So we have a huge continent, actually two huge continents, North and South America, that today are so diverse, but it's not easy. It's not just that easy to make science and understand what happened all over these years, these thousands of years, at least today. So I hope that we can have more efforts and collaborations, and we can improve with that. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Oops, no, here, stop share. And be able to see you, and hope that I didn't talk too much. I thought that I was gonna be like quickly, but yeah, I'm open to talks and to questions.
That was awesome. And I also, for those who don't know, it's like 2 hours later right now where Dr. Thais Pansani is. So we'll,
I'm
we'll,
totally
we'll try to
okay.
let you get some rest at some point. I appreciate you taking the time. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and actually they're still rolling in. So the first one says, are there North American species today that are typical descendants or relatives of those animals around just before the megafauna extinctions?
North Americans, should they? I think so. I like the gamba. I forgot the word in English now. We have like those. Oh, I forgot the word in English of those animals. So like maybe I can show the picture here. Anteater possum family. So the possums, they come from originally from South America. So it's one example of species that today you guys have there and
Are
comes
only Native American marsupial, I believe, right? And you were saying that
exactly,
they had the marsupial thing that looked like a saber-toothed cat
exactly.
earlier,
Marsupials were all from South America.
and the possum's the only one left of that lineage.
Yeah, and today you guys have a specific species of armadillos, for example, also.
Great, thank you. Several other questions. So first of all, someone wants to pin you down. What's your opinion? Were Homo species and their use of fire responsible for at least some species?
In my opinion, yes, but it was not quickly. So in my opinion, we were here in the Americas way before what we think. So I work with really early archaeological sites and evidence for human megafauna interaction around 25,000 years ago, 27,000 years ago. So I think that we were able to live with them in a sustainable manner, and we were able to interact with the megafauna for some time when the conditions, like during the ice age cycles, the conditions were not that great and we didn't have like a lot of density. But once we were able to expand and we were able to manage fire all over the place and changing environments, the landscape, and having more practice with hunting, and yeah, I think that the density is the key. So once we have higher density because of the climate change around the 11,000 years ago, when we have like optimal conditions, maybe we have like this road in their extinction. Because for me, just climate change does not explain, because the Pleistocene have a lot of climate change. And what happened is that these animals were in smaller or greater populations. They were in specific refugee areas, but they were not extinct over, at least, just talking about the Pleistocene, 2 million years, like they were not extinct. So why just like 10,000 years ago? So I don't think that climate change alone explains that, especially when we're thinking about all the continents. Like the climate change affect all the continents in the same way that affected only mammals, like huge mammals, is weird for me. So I think that humans did play a role more recent.
Do we have any evidence, or can we know anything about maybe the interactions between different groups of humans? That you're mentioning, like there were humans in North America as far back as 30,000 years ago, and then maybe there was a wave of the Clovis culture, 10,000 or whatever. Can we know anything about what happened when those two groups met each other, and does that somehow play into the loss of the animals?
Yeah, we do have one of the most beautiful evidence for me is the White Sands National Park. I don't know if you guys ever heard about or saw the paper or media papers about that. We have in the White Sands National Park, evidence of human footprints and also animal megafauna footprints and some megafauna intercalating like together with humans, and a specifically giant sloth that they identified as a giant sloth footprint that is like this huge footprint, and then human above that. So we have like this overlapping of giant sloth and humans footprints. And so they were walking in a very, if it's not like 2 hours after, at least like 2 days after, like really in the same time. So this is one of the most beautiful evidence for me of human megafauna interaction in the Americas. And this site, this evidence, the footprints, dates to around 23,000 years ago, at least. So it was still happening. It was still during the Ice Age. So the last ice age happened between 26 to 19,000 years ago. So 23 is still like during the ice age. So humans were in New Mexico in the White Sands around that time, interacting with these sloths and these animals. In this site, we only know with the footprints that they were walking together, right? So we cannot know if they were hunting giant sloths. They were walking together. And several other sites. So in Canada, we have evidence for humans hunting horses. And then we have some archaeological sites in the US saying that humans were hunting mastodons around before 20,000 years ago, around 30,000 years ago, for example, in the Colorado Plateau. And then we have here in Brazil, like the archaeological site that I worked during my PhD is in central Brazil, in the center of South America, and have evidence of material culture, so evidence that human populations were there making stone tools together in the same association, the same layer with giant sloths. And some of these giant sloths were reworked for pendants, for ornaments. We don't know exactly if it were like pendants or necklace or whatever, but ornaments. They use the bones, they rework the bones of giant sloths. So this dated to around 25 to 27,000 years ago. So yeah, we have like several, we can have like another talk just to talk about the evidence of humans interacting with megafauna, but we still don't know like how bad that could be during that time or how sustainable that could be during that time. And if the key is the density and how, okay, we learn more how to interact with these animals and we have more, we have like a bigger group of a huge family that will help me, because definitely even hunting a giant sloth. I know that they are herbivores, but they're huge. So are we able to face that risk just for meat if we have like small mammals too? Or are we just scavenging them? It's a lot of questions.
If they're anything like modern sloths, they had nasty claws too, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, they did have like those big like claws that definitely were great along during the Cenozoic, like since the evolution of the earliest giant sloths to defend themselves from the carnivores like the saber-toothed cats. So they would try to defend them if humans were trying to hunt them too. So maybe they were not hunting so much. They were just scavenging. They found someone dead, some sloth dead, and they just, okay, let me eat that meat, let me use the fur. We still have a lot to answer on that.
I would love to invite you back for that other talk at some point. Several more questions. You mentioned earlier fossil capybara relatives. Were rodents already in the Americas before the Great American Biotic Interchange?
I don't think so. Like the large, let me see here if there's something that I missed. No, I think that the rodents, I mean, at least like the large rodents like capybaras. I don't know if maybe small rodents, but large rodents, no, as I'm
I,
aware.
I had a similar question, but I'll hold it for a minute and we can get to the questions that the folks have asked in the chat here. So what is the strongest argument against calling our current era the Anthropocene?
I want to know too, because for me, like, I'm very inclined to think that we are in the Anthropocene. So I asked the same question to geologists, like, why not? Like, the rock, like sedimentary rocks with plastic, for me is like, as a paleontologist, for me, that is like, wow, is in our geological record already. So that is very strong. But they say, as far as I understand the geological kind of mindset, they think that we don't have enough difference from the Holocene, like the Holocene is already marked by human expansion, blah, 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 blah. So we need to have like a very big event and that is in the geological stratum, like that change something. But I think also like the plastic, like the pollution, I think that it makes sense, but I think that this is the stronger argument for them, that we don't have a big event that is in the geological layers, like that separates what we're living to the Holocene. We need to have something bigger.
Got it. Another question, how far north did the megafauna live?
All north, like them. I don't know if he is asking about the American megafauna or like all the megafauna, because all the megafauna, like Eurasia, like Russia, like all north, like there was megafauna all over the continents. And the American megafauna, I think also like the northeast of Canada, like even some species of giant sloths that are, because of the uh, American interchange, they reach to Canada, but not the same ones, right, that live in South America. So like a different species from a different family, but some ground sloth even reach Canada.
There's a display currently up at the museum that talks about the mammoth steppe and the specialized habitat that the megafauna created. And you talked about that, how they were
That's
sort of
nice.
ecosystem engineers, but it went pretty far up.
Oh, that's
Um,
so great.
yeah, it's neat. Speaking of rodents, you showed a slide early on that had something that looked to me a little bit like a shrew, but it had these super weird, like projecting teeth that were sticking out. Um, it was before you got into the discussion of the very large animals, and I keep thinking about those teeth, and I'm trying to understand what those teeth were for. Like, were they
Like
for
a
defense? Yeah,
small
but
mammal.
yeah, and they kind of like stuck out at odd angles. Was it a mole? Was it for digging, maybe? Like, what's the story with those teeth?
Yeah, I'm not an expertise of early mammals.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Brazil, we have very amazing scientists who work with the emergence, like the evolution of the Triassic mammals and the Cenozoic and all of that. That is amazing. I would be happy to give you some names and they can talk more about mammals. So mammal evolution, I don't know. I cannot answer that. But yeah, we definitely have like amazing fossil record in South Brazil, together like close and even like in the same region, if you think about not the geopolitical borders, but just like geographic borders, like South Brazil is almost Argentina, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, we have like amazing fossils that could answer that, but I don't know. I don't understand a lot about small mammals evolution and how they work with their this teeth.
I understood that it was a bit of a digression when I was asking it, but I thought it was worth a chance. Great presentation. I agree. Everybody's giving you kudos now
Oh,
in the
thank
chat.
you. It's
Thank you
always
so
nervous
much.
when we're doing in English, so I'm sorry if something was confusing. We're
Oh,
always
no, no. I thought it was all perfectly clear
second
and
guessing,
straightforward.
like
You
if you're
explained
saying the
everything.
right thing.
No, no, no issues on our end. So thank you so much for taking the time. And again, I'll be in touch because I think a lot of us would love to hear more from you, but we don't need another hour
Sure.
right now because you got to go get some rest.
No, no worries. Like I say, I'm not in, I don't go to bed early, so I'm free for any questions that you might have.
Anything else? Any other questions? It's a little after 8, so we can wrap this up, or we could. All right.
Hmm. How far
Thank
are you guys from DC?
About an hour,
Mm, nice.
depending on traffic.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe if I come back to DC for some analysis or something, we can think about something in person. That
That
would be
would be wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to create that connection. Some of our volunteers have experience working at the Smithsonian, but I would love to have
mm,
something like a trip there. That would be amazing. Great. Dr. Thais Pisani, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
thank
That was really
you.
interesting.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Take care.